Playoffs are here in North Texas and in all of Texas, in Texas high school football, and this might be one of the better by-district rounds I can remember in the past handful of years. We'll break that down with Ryan Osborne. I'm Travis Brown of DFWVARSITY.com. But first, we have some epic moments from last week. We have a couple of them, or a few of them from last week. First, we have Burleson beating Everman by beating them and then beating him by the 7 points. Ended up beating him 48-27 to make it into the playoffs. So hats off to Burleson for that impressive covering the spread win, I guess you could call it. For Trimble Tech, getting in the playoffs for the first time in 25 years is pretty impressive as well. And you saw Keller do something interesting as well, too.
Yeah, Keller lost by 2 to Justin Northwest, but they actually took a knee at the end of the game with a few seconds left, and because they lost by less than 7, they were able to clinch a playoff spot, and Justin Northwest was actually left out because they needed to win by at least 4. So it was a weird scenario there in Keller, but I think their coach, CARROLL, is glad to be back in the playoffs, first time since 2009 for that program. So I think they'd take it, and they got the top seed in Division I, so it wasn't too bad of a situation to take a knee in.
Right. Maybe not as much epic as just weird. But anyway, breakdown games. We have first one of many at AT&T Stadium this week, and it probably is one of the best, if not the best, in the state, with Southlake Carroll and a very kind of surprised Mansfield team.
Yeah, Mansfield is always solid. They lost in the first round last year, but this year they beat Cedar Hill. Kennedy Brooks, who came up from junior varsity in the middle of the season, has I believe over 700 yards rushing in the last 5 games. So he's really burst onto the scene. He gives them an attack that can keep these spread offenses like Southlake Carroll off the field, sort of going into they kind of leverage that ball control offense with Kennedy Brooks. And, of course, Julius Lewis, the TCU commitment on defense, is sort of a lockdown corner. But as far as Southlake Carroll goes, they've been one of the more impressive, probably the more solid teams in the area. They've played. They squeaked by Julius Trinity earlier in the year. But I think it comes down to Carroll's quarterback play, and Ryan Agnew, the senior, wants to take them on a deep playoff run this year. Kind of got cut a little bit short last year in the 3rd round. And I think they take care of business and get onto the area round this week against Mansfield.
What's been surprising about Southlake this year is, for a team that's all about the quarterback, a program that's been all about the quarterback and throwing the ball around and kind of developing these gunslingers, they've been really getting it done on the ground game with little Jordan Humphrey, and he's really been the one that's carried this offense almost more than Agnew. So it'll be interesting to see if things balance out a little bit more in the playoffs. Mansfield surely has shown they're not definitely scared of bigger time programs and teams that don't have a lot of losses in that win over Cedar Hill. So it should be a good matchup. I think Carroll will win this one as well, but it could be close and could come down to the wire. Next we have Euless Trinity versus South Grand Prairie. That's another one at AT&T Stadium. South Grand Prairie is a team that's 5-5, but I think they're better than what their record shows. Yeah, they're
probably one of the best 5-5 teams in the state. That said, they lost to Mansfield. They weren't really in games against Cedar Hill and DeSoto, which, of course, you lose those 2 games in that district, and that's not really a knock on you because those teams are so far out in front of the pack. Euless Trinity, on the other hand, they lost to Carroll, as I mentioned, but they were able to finish strong, and it will be a 16-day layoff between the time because they had their bye week on the final week of the season, and they play on Saturday night this week. So I think Trinity will come out, do their thing, run the ball. It'll probably be a close game, but at the end of the night, they will wear down South Grand Prairie, which, it's a shame SGP is only probably going to go one round this year because they're a solid team. But, that's what happens when you run into Trinity. Right.
It'll be interesting. My look on Trinity is, of course, they're not going to be a passing team. They're going to run the ball, and they're going to run it as much as they possibly can. But there are those instances where they will need to throw the ball to get out of a deep 3rd and long or make up for a holding call or something like that. And sometimes they've shown that they can do that, maybe run a quick screen or something like that. Sometimes they haven't. And once they get further in the playoffs, that'll be an interesting thing to see if they can do to get out of those situations. And this would be a good week to kind of start that progression going. I have Trinity in this one as well. And then finally, we have Fort Worth Arlington Heights versus Burleson Centennial, and kind of one with a lot of local flavor in it.
Yeah, this is, I think, one of the best matchups, most evenly matched games this week. You have a Heights team that is rolling 10-0 and a Burleson Centennial team that's been their third year as a program, first time in the playoffs. They finished second in that district behind Aledo. They are a solid football team that will keep games close with kind of a different rushing attack, almost like a power option type scheme that people aren't used to seeing. But Heights, they have Dion Hare-Griffin at quarterback, who is explosive, and if you go back to the South Hills game, that's the toughest team they've played this year. They did not stop Heights one time except for 2 fumbles. So they didn't force any punts because Dion Hare-Griffin just made a play either with his arm or his feet, and I think he's able to squeeze by Centennial in what should be a pretty close first-round game. But I think Heights gets to the second round for the first time in about 4 years.
Right. I like Heights, but I like Heights for their defense. If you take just about all their games except for that South Hills games, they're holding teams to about 10 points a game, which is pretty impressive in this area and in just Texas high school football in general. And I think that's a little bit undersold quality of this team. The knock on Heights and the knock on any of these Fort Worth ISD schools, especially Heights, who's usually been the leader of the pack of these teams, is once they get out of that district play, are they really as good as a 10-0 record demonstrates? I think this team is different than some of the teams in the past, and actually is as good as that 10-0 record dictates. With the competition, and I think they'll get the job done against Centennial. All right, no huddle. We have DeSoto versus Coppell at AT&T Stadium.
DeSoto.
I'm going to go with DeSoto as well. Keller versus Plano West.
Plano West.
Plano West on Soso Jamabo's legs. McKinney Boyd versus Keller Fossil Ridge.
Ridge didn't look too good last week. I'm going to go with Boyd, but this is another one of the better matchups this week.
I like Boyd. I like Boyd a lot in this season. I like Boyd in this game. Allen versus Keller Central. Allen, of course. St. Angelo Central versus Arlington Bowie.
I'll go with Bowie. This is another one of the best matchups. I think Bowie's speed will eventually get them past Central on the road. But, man, that's a tough draw for a first-round game.
Exactly. I'm going to go with Bowie as well. Odessa Permian versus Arlington Sam Houston.
I will go with Mojo, despite the fact that Sam Houston has had a good season. But I'll go with Permian to get this one on their home field. Yeah,
I like the home field advantage. I'm going to go with Sam Houston in this game, though. Cedar Hill versus Colleyville Heritage.
Cedar Hill.
I'm going to go with Cedar Hill. South Hills versus Burleson.
South Hills.
South Hills. And Dallas South Oak Cliff versus Lancaster.
I'll go with South Oak Cliff.
Yeah, give me Sock in that game as well. Go out and see a great slate of by-district round games this week. Check DFWVarsity.com for the recaps and stats of those games, and we'll see you next week on the High School Huddle.